Hello, everyone, and welcome back to For Fox's Sake. This is the Women's Football Show featuring me, your host, Lily Saunders, and I am incredibly delighted to be joined by the SheGulls today. This is Duncan Price, the owner and founder of Brighton Hove Albion Supporters Club, the SheGulls, which is an excellent name, by the way.
Thank you. Yeah, we always get
And
compliments on that.
Yeah, and you run a fantastic blog, which I've been perusing through this afternoon. So thank you very much for hopping on our podcast today, Duncan.
Welcome. Very happy to be here.
Brilliant. So we were chatting earlier, and you said that you've had a chance to look at the Leicester City Aston Villa game. Obviously, pretty. I think Ellen White described it as gut wrenching, and I think that perfectly sums it up. From a Leicester perspective, it's sixth defeat in a row. And I think just probably a lot of frustration, considering our position at half time, 1-0 up. So yeah, what did you make of the game, Duncan? What are your general thoughts?
I was quite impressed with Leicester. Certainly, like you say, in the first half. I think there's a lot of teams probably outside of the top four who, on any given day, can kind of step up, or equally they can have a bad day or whatever it is, bad half, or bad period in the game. Or equally, they can have good period, so on and so forth. I think that's the danger sometimes. Is if you put together a really good first half, but then it doesn't quite go on, you don't go on to get that second goal, or whatever it may be. Obviously the opposition get one back in this case. It can be then hard to sort of turn the tide, as it were. So I think I thought it was a good game. It was quite tense in periods, and obviously I think Leicester, having gone 1-0 down, beg your pardon, gone 1-0 up, wanted to obviously try and score that second, but you could kind of tell there was a little bit in the back of the mind of not conceding at the same time. I thought overall they played well, and I think a draw probably would have made sense, would have been a fairer result, but that's the way it goes sometimes, isn't it?
No, it is, and I think they've done so well to put themselves in that position. But considering how hard goals have been to come by for Leicester and how much difficulty um, kind of the attacking lineups have had with putting the ball in the back of the net, there definitely was a sense I felt that, like, don't concede, set on the 1-0 and try and see the game out. And that's a very difficult position to be in, I think, at half time, is to decide whether to push on for a second goal or whether to try and shut up shop. And I think the way that they conceded so early in the second half really changed the momentum. It kind of took the wind out of their sails, I think. So I do agree. It made for some very tense watching, I have to say. But Leicester did surprisingly well to score in a game where they had considerable lack of attacking kind of opportunities or players. So Mouchon, who played in the game against Liverpool, was unfortunately out with an injury. They were without Sarah Mailing, obviously playing against her parent club, who has done a lot, I think, in terms of playing in that wing back position and peppering the box with some brilliant crosses. So it was a shame not to have her. Obviously, Rantala is still out with and coming back from her injury, and same with Denny Draper, the youngster. So it felt like, when it was 1-1, come 60 minutes, and you're bringing on Rachel Williams and then later on Rosella Ayana, it felt like Leicester didn't really have anything more to offer. Would you agree with that, Duncan?
I would, and it's something that I definitely sympathise with, because we have a very, very similar problem at Brighton. So a lot of the games, I go through the exact same sort of gamut of emotions and feelings that you guys do with Leicester, that I do with Brighton, and I don't. It's hard to put your finger on it. Sometimes, like you say, it is injuries. Sometimes it's recruitment. There were quite a few teams who obviously strengthened in January, and strengthened quite well. So there have been sort of the second half of the season. I mean, Liverpool, for example, have been a totally different team. So you kind of go into these games thinking, oh, we've got a chance here, or oh, we ought to beat them, or so on and so forth. And then you actually get into the game and you think, well, they're not. They probably are. A bit better in certain areas than we are, and the game is a bit more even than it should be, and things like that. So I think Aston Villa are a tricky team to play against. I think they're a bit of a mixed bag. You don't know exactly what you're going to get with them, and I think that's probably why they sort of sit where they do in the table. And again, very similar to the Albion, you kind of don't know which team is turning up sometimes. But yeah, I mean, as a team who kind of had a striker who obviously was our kind of hoping to be our sort of goal scoring threat, Michelle Adjman, go down in October and then not really replace her in the January. Exactly like you say, there are players that you bring on and you think, okay, well, that is an attacking substitute, but equally, it's probably not necessarily going to be the game changer that you would hope. I think every team is looking for good goal scoring options, and obviously, if you're quite thin on the ground with those, or you have players that are injured, you mentioned like Rantala, who is always plays good against us. I think she got injured against us actually, so sorry about that. It's harder for teams at the lower end of the table, again, particularly outside the top four, to cope with losing those players. Because the players that we're going to have on the bench are not necessarily, beating down the door, to get into the team because of the level we're at. So, to me, Leicester did what they could, but again, it was probably just not quite enough. And then obviously Soslaw, Villa go on to score the winner late on. So.
Yeah, look, I mean, and that winner, you could argue Leipzig should have done better, perhaps, with that goal. She's looked a bit rusty since returning from injury, and I think injuries in general have just been a real thorn in Leicester's side for the season, as I'm sure you'll also sympathise with, like you said. So it was a shame, but we can talk about the Lehmann goal. I think that kind of attacking play, that transition from defense to attack, and seeing the way that was set up, we haven't seen anything like that, I think, in the last 6 games, and I thought it was a very well worked goal.
Yeah, it certainly showed that the ability to score that type of goal was there. Like you say, it's not necessarily something you were had an eye on, or you thought that it was going to happen, or like there'd been much precedent of up till then. But it shows that in certain circumstances, with more time to play together, etc., then you do find players on the same wavelength and things like that. So I think that's just a sort of a timing and a personnel thing, and it was obviously, like you say, a really well worked goal. And it's good to see Alicia Lehmann get on the score sheet, because I think she obviously she draws attention for other reasons, and I think she's a bit maligned because of that. But she is a good footballer. She's a very good footballer. She certainly deserves to be playing in the top flight somewhere. And I'm kind of glad that she got that goal, and that it was such a well worked goal, because it will get more eyes on the footballing side of things. Yeah, absolutely well worked goal. Obviously, you'd love to see that more. We all would for our team, wouldn't we? But sometimes they do just work out, and that felt like a sort of perfect moment type thing.
Yeah, and we've got a comment in here from you over on YouTube. Daedalus215 says, at 1-1, we were never going to win that game. Shocking that we can't do the basics. Lehmann was making runs with 2 defenders with her, and 2 forward passes over the top were nowhere near in her path. I think that's probably more of what we've been used to, especially this side of the winter break, is misaligned passes, balls not going to feet, balls going too far forwards over the top. I just think, yeah, that's where a lot of the frustration has come from fans, that we can't get the basics right. So we definitely sympathise with you. And another comment: the Lehman goal was a training ground move, and we looked good in the first half. Leipzig has constantly become soft over time. Yeah, I just think it's coming back from injury. She's just not looked the same. It was a similar sort of mistake in the Liverpool game, that let in that first goal. So we hope that she can get back to her best. Obviously, with Olivia Clark out, she's really our only option. So yeah, well, a frustrating game to watch. Real disappointment in terms of Leicester's kind of position at the moment, fighting to get out of that 12th place in the table in the bottom. Hopefully, we can get ourselves out of there. Rick Passmore seems to think that we will. He's been very kind of adamant that saying that the tide will turn, can't turn our backs on the challenge. So it's nice to see, Duncan, isn't it, when a coach still has that belief and is willing to stand up for his side, in front of media and in front of the fans. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's one of those things where if you don't believe you can go into games and win, then you're probably in the wrong job. I think there's a bit of a misnomer where people say, "Oh, well, they play this game or whatever. They might be happy with the draw." I genuinely don't think any managers or players think like that. I think we as fans, to a certain extent, we have half a mind on that. But I just think it's the mark of elite coaches and managers and players that you're not beaten until the whistle's blown and you haven't scored as many goals as the opposition, sort of thing. So I think he believes it. I think he's genuine, but also he wants to instill that into the players. And there were you could see elements of that on on the weekend. I think the difficulty is, and again, this is something that we share at Brighton, is when the going gets tough, sometimes the head goes down, and there isn't that mentality of overcoming it, which kind of the top four and certain players who have played a long time and stuff will have. So it's always a balance. But no, I mean, from the manager's perspective, he always says the right things. He's always backing the team. And I should imagine they take a lot of pride from that, and they're certainly not not winning games because of a lack of support from the staff and from those around them. So I think that's he's doing exactly the right thing, and I'm sure he will until the last day of the season.
He will. Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure of it. He's always the positive guy, positive voice. So we've got to keep the fans behind the girls, and I'm sure we'll get over the line. I'm sure of it. So let's talk a bit about SheGulls then, Duncan, because it's a similar kind of outlook, like outset as here over here on For Fox's Sake. But yeah, how and why did SheGulls start? We're very curious to know.
Yeah, it basically started in 2023. So I'd been a season ticket holder for the women for a season before that. As a lot of people were sort of inspired by Euro 2022. But I had actually I'd been to women's games and stuff before. We'd had a couple at the Amex before. We actually had an England international, I think in 2019, that I went to. So I was always following the women's game, but I wasn't invested in it. And then watching Euro 2022, I've got two daughters. One of them who doesn't care for football at all, but my eldest one was like, "When can I go and see more?" So I was like, right, okay, well, let's go all in on Brighton and let's go to some of these games. Also, doesn't help that it's a bit more financially, easier on the pocket as well to take. I don't have £1,000 unfortunately to take to the men's ones, and nor would I at this stage, to be honest with you. I'm like I say, we're all in on the women, but I think after that first season, I started to look sort of beyond the people who sort of sat in the seats around me. We had the World Cup, obviously England get to the final, and I sort of thought, oh, I'm really excited about the upcoming season. Have we got like Twitter handles? Have we got a supporters group? Have we got like a community? And essentially, sort of everywhere I looked, there was nothing really there. I think there was one small sort of channel on Instagram where they were kind of doing a few bits and bobs, but it was more like graphics and stuff like that. It wasn't kind of interacting with other fans so much. So yeah, that's where SheGulls was born. Started off as a WordPress site with all the sub addresses and things and everything, and then over the next year or so, we got the SheGulls.com name, started to get more followers, had meetings with the club, which led to us becoming an official supporters club, which helps. But we kind of walk on both sides of that tightrope, in that we don't have, strictly speaking, members. We don't have like a committee or anything like that, because that's not really why I started up SheGulls. It was more to kind of be a platform, and also I come from sort of like a writing background, so I wanted to do like the media side of things. So it was very much, we're kind of all things to all people at the moment, and it might be one day down the line that someone comes along and starts something else up, and we start to pull away slightly from that side. But at the moment, we're very happy doing media and supporters club stuff, and it's we've really gone from strength to strength, and we're strengthening those ties with the club as well. So over the last couple of years, we're in press conferences now. I go to the post-match press conference, stuff like that. So it's that's testament to us as an organisation, and the volunteers that work with me, and also for the club for giving us the the backing and the access to allow us to earn that trust. So yeah, that's kind of where we are.
No, that's brilliant. And getting that support from the club, I think, is key, isn't it? It's having the ability to have access to the players. Like I saw you did an interview with Maisie Simmons recently, and it gives that kind of extra edge to it, and gives people access to, I guess, insight into the team that they wouldn't otherwise have, and carving out a space for that in the Brighton kind of supporters group and community. So it's so good to hear, and that's why we started here on For Fox's Sake. There was no Leicester City Women's Focus podcast, and we really wanted to be able to deliver that to the fans, and deliver it obviously professionally as well. That's really important, that it's kind of a professional outset and a professional outlook. So I totally I think it's amazing what you've done over at SheGulls. And I guess Brighton are now, I'd probably argue, a very well established mid-table team. And the question I think we're dying to ask on For Fox's Sake is, how can Leicester get there? What do you think Leicester need to do? Does that come from stuff like this, like building community, building a fan base, like to encourage growth amongst supporters that have maybe come over from the men's side? Does that look like investing in a stadium, for example, which I know Brighton are doing? Where do you think Leicester need to look at in terms of trying to get themselves out of fighting relegation every season?
Yeah, it's a very tricky one, because I mean, self-admittedly, we're not all that far above the sort of
Maybe this season,
you guys. Yeah, this season, it's been a very tumultuous season for us, I must admit. It's a tricky one, because I think I agree with you. Obviously, the stadium, is a factor, and eventually we will have our sort of brand spanking new stadium. We call it Schrodinger's Stadium at the moment, because it sort of exists, but it doesn't, and we're not sure. But that's a strange one, because in some ways, I would say we envy you guys for that, because obviously you're playing at the, at the King Power, which I must admit, everyone always says is like one of, if not the favourite, away day. They love the stadium and everything like that. So in some ways, I think there's a lot of us I wouldn't say myself included, mainly because I've got a special affinity for the Broadfield. But there's a lot of people who would say they'd rather play at the Amex than the Broadfield, because it's obviously out of town, further up towards sort of Gatwick and that area, South London sort of thing. So yeah, that's one where you've probably got us, if anything. I would say probably the main difference would be maybe the recruitment. And I don't get me wrong, I have issues with Brighton's recruitment as well, to be honest with you. But I think trying to get those players who are not necessarily, that they're a talent that's going to get hoovered up by the top four, but it's kind of having those players who are maybe either working towards that or coming back down from that. Maybe they're starting to get a bit older, and etc. etc. Obviously, Fran Kirby springs to mind from our perspective, although obviously that comes with the fact that she is, she struggles to get through every single game of the whole season. She'll inevitably go down for 3-4 games here and 1 or 2 there, sort of thing. That's just the rough with the smooth sort of thing. But I think if you have players that draw in the crowds and are sort of household names and things like that, then the gravitas sort of improves, and then other players will start to go, oh, so and so's there. We signed Kiko Seiki from her club in Japan, but then she's very good friends with Moaka Minami and Fuka Nagano from Liverpool and stuff. So, and in the end, we end up getting Minami from Roma. And I have no doubt that if the fact that her friend played for Brighton had an impact on that. And that has improved our team, no doubt about it. So I think that would probably be the one thing. I mean, I was a little bit sad that you guys ended up losing Ruby Mace, because I think she's the next Kira Walsh to me. I actually think she's better than Kira Walsh, but I'm just whispering that just in case any Chelsea fans listening. But yeah, I think that is what I would love Brighton to do, and I think that would probably be a good thing for Leicester to do, is try and identify those players who are next on the totem pole, because naturally that will elevate you up the league. But also then when they do get called up for national teams, under 23s and stuff like that, then the press are in, and it becomes a name on everyone's lips and things like that. So I don't think either of our teams are in the position to sort of do a London City and just here's a release clause fee, 500,000, yeah, no problem, sign that off.
Yeah.
I've seen London City twice this season, obviously home and away, and Grascioro, to be honest with you, I wouldn't have given you £5,000 for her. So, and that's not to say she's not a good player, but it's just we're living in a different, you can't sort of turn up one day and not the other, and things like that when you play for our clubs, because we need you. So yeah, that would be my thing. I think the stadium's great. I think you've got great fans. I always like talking to, I'm involved in other supporters club stuff like the Football Supporters Association, stuff like that. Leicester have a really good representation there, and everything like that. So I don't think it's necessarily there's necessarily anything going wrong. I think it's just for a lot of clubs, it really is hard to compete with that top four. And then everything else is just a goal here or a goal there. And, if you can find that edge somewhere, then that's what you have to do.
No, you're right. I think it's the recruitment as well, and having the kind of ability to say, "Oh, we're a team that attracts big names. We perform. Come and play for us," is so important. I think that's what I think Everton have done well in the past, doing. Not necessarily getting the results they've wanted, but obviously they snapped up Ruby Mace from Leicester. So they have that pull from the bottom teams as well. And I was gutted when she left. I think I don't know about the Kira Walsh comment just yet, Duncan, but Kira Walsh is
One
she's
day,
getting
one
older,
day.
isn't she?
Yeah, one day.
One day. I think she's not had maybe the impact at Chelsea as she's had elsewhere, but
No.
yeah, I think definitely recruitment. And we've got another comment here saying player wages matter too. I mean, we spoke about London City and what they've done with player wages. I think they got really excited about Grace Gioro's performances at the World Cup, and then she hasn't really turned up since. I'd agree with you there, but that does matter. Investment,
Yeah,
you will attract bigger names with bigger wage bills, and maybe that can help. But obviously, where does the money come from? You know, we've got to get people to the games. We've got to get money into the clubs. So yeah, Leicester have a fantastic supporters club, brilliant fans that I think everyone loves coming down to the King Power. I think sharing the King Power with the men makes it feel like a bit of a one club atmosphere as well. So there's that argument, I guess, to not building a separate stadium. But yeah, recruitment is the number one thing, isn't it? Brilliant.
absolutely.
Tiny bit more about SheGulls, but I wanted to ask you what has been your favourite moment since you started this supporters club. What has been a moment that's really stood out to you? Because I like keeping things nice and positive here on us as well. And you always get such good stories when you ask this question.
That is a very good question. I think if I may, I'll give you two, only because one's football related
Okay.
and one's not. Um, we beat Arsenal 4-2 at home last season. That was probably the pinnacle of my actual support, just my actual support of the club, because literally I remember writing an article about would have been about 6 or 7 months prior for an away guide for Brighton fans going to the Emirates, and I didn't put the previous head to head because we had never beaten them. Normally I say, oh, we've beaten them so many out, 4 out the last 5, well, whoever it is, sort of thing. But I didn't do it on this occasion because I thought no one wanted to see that we'd lost the last 10 games straight and ad infinitum, basically. And we lost that game, needless to say. But it just to be able to, get one over on them. I know they had the Champions League final in mind, I'm sure, and I think they'd already lost to Villa maybe in the week before that. But it was one of those moments where you just thought, we've just beaten Arsenal and we've actually scored 4 goals against them. Like, it wasn't a 1-0 sort of, eked out at the end. We actually dominated them, and some cracking goals in that as well. I think it's one of those ones where you had you thought, oh, that was goal of the season. Then the next goal would go and you go, no, scratch that. We're going to have to change it to the to the next one.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think football wise, it would be that. I think probably as SheGulls, I would say we have always done something for International Women's Day. We've always sort of tried to promote it on our channels, and we've always donated to a local charity or whatever. We're not talking about tons and tons of money, but just something to sort of local charities and stuff. But the club hadn't really done anything. I don't think, not certainly since SheGulls had been around, but this International Women's Day just gone, they actually held kind of like it's hard to describe it really. It was sort of it was an evening event, and it had like a Q&A with some of the players. The manager was there. There was also some other athletes from other sports and things like that. And it just really felt we were invited as part of SheGulls, and I was able to take quite a few guests. I think there's 5 or 6 of us who work on SheGulls in some capacity. Yeah, it was a really incredible night. There were lots of incredible female athletes there. There were lots of Brighton Hove Albion staff there, so it was good to meet some of those that I didn't already know and catch up with ones that I did. And it was just such a positive atmosphere. It was just brilliant, and it was even better because it was under the umbrella of International Women's Day. So I think as a supporters club, and just as a general entity, that was one of those moments where you thought this doesn't come without putting the work in. I'm sure you guys are on a lot higher, but we've done like 90 episodes of the podcast now. We do it week in, week out. Very, very rarely ever miss a Monday show, unless it's like a 3 or 4 week break with no football, because then what would we talk about, quite frankly? We did have a week off whenever it was the last international break. But yeah, like I say, it was like we felt very privileged to be there, and it was a great event. And like I say, it was just sort of sitting there and looking around these people, many of whom I was familiar with, and just kind of going, okay, this is where the journey's taken us. So I would say on a SheGulls note, that would probably be the best moment.
Oh, that sounds fantastic. I wish I was there to witness.
Mm.
No, it's great. It's so great that you can be involved in things like that, and obviously that's come from you guys doing it originally, and you've kind of pushed the club, or the club has spotted that and decided to do something about it. So that's just amazing, and obviously very, very important, very important cause as well. Brilliant. So let's talk about the upcoming fixture. Leicester City versus Brighton and Hove Albion. Brighton are, I guess, out of contention for relegation, I think, by this point. I
I
I'm
hope.
hopeful. I don't see them ending up in bottom place, but you never know. But I think Leicester are obviously bottom and need the 3 points from this game. What do you see? Where will Brighton be looking to exploit Leicester, Duncan? Firstly,
I would have thought that they will probably back themselves to be the better team, sort of 1v1. So I would expect, we like to have possession, we like to press high. I would have thought that would be the goal. We are not blessed with a lot of pace, so a lot of teams like to sit in and counter us, which is what you guys did so effectively last season against us, to go 3-0 up. It was just, I mean, we had our heads in our hands, obviously, but yeah, I think that's our strength, is possession, high press, build up, that sort of thing. But we are quite weak against the counter. We're weaker against the pace. So I'd expect some defensive changes from our last game against Liverpool, even though it was a clean sheet. But yeah, I think it will. I think it will be a close game. I don't honestly see. I think there are some Brighton fans who are sort of thinking, well, we beat. I think it was 4-1 in the reverse fixture, but it's a different story. Leicester in a different position. We're in a different position. Injuries, for both teams and things like that. It's. I think it will be quite close. I wouldn't be surprised if it was, 1-0, 2-1 either way. But we are very much hoping for 3 points from our perspective. Of course we are, but mainly because I think we play our last 4 games are 4 of the top 5 teams. So we have Arsenal, Man City, Man United, and Spurs. So there's equally a lot of Albions looking at this fixture and going, which of these games are we going to win? Leicester makes sense.
yeah,
Which I think in context it does make sense, but it doesn't mean that you just turn up and you've won the game. So, so I think they will very much try and play their game, but whether that works against Leicester, if you can't just take the one game early this season, you've got to take last year into account and everything. It hasn't always been successful, so it will be a very interesting game to watch, I think.
absolutely, and Leicester can sympathise on that front. We've got, admittedly, a game in hand, but that's against Arsenal of all teams. And we've also got Chelsea coming up as well. So I think Leicester fans will agree with the Brighton fans in saying that those fixtures, perhaps you're not so hopeful that you'd get any points out of that. But then I guess Everton, London City Lionesses, we beat London City in the reverse fixture. so there's every opportunity to beat them again. I would agree with you. And on the Leicester side of things, I think we will sit back and look for pace on the counter. Which kind of Leicester players are you wary of, Duncan? Who do you think has been standout this season, if there hasn't been any standout players?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I mean, I do think I think Mouchon is a very very good player. I don't know what her fitness status will be for the weekend.
So
Um,
Rick Parsmore said she would be out for this week, meaning the Villa game. So I think
right.
there is an opportunity for her to be back on at least in the matchday squad. I don't know whether she'd start, but
Yeah.
she'd be on
Yeah.
the bench.
Yeah. I mean, basically anyone who's got the sort of pace to get down the flanks is going to be a danger to the Albion. Also, I think whether she starts or not, or whether she just is a super sub, but of a super sub. But Rachel Williams is one of those players who, annoyingly, just whenever she plays against us, she seems to score. So that's that's always in the back of our mind. Whether she comes on or starts. You have these sort of players in your mind, don't you? Like, oh no, don't put them on. They're going to score. You just know they're going to
Yeah.
score. So yeah, I mean, otherwise, I think there are some. I think you've got a really good English core, and I think that is something that actually Brighton could learn a bit from. Like you say, we've got Maisie Simons, but Tierney and O'Brien are two who if they ever fancied moving somewhere with a nice beach or and also another player who I think we had interest before she went to Leicester, and I always butcher her name, so I'm sure you will tell me how it is supposed to be said, but Asmita Ale, Ale, is it
I
Ale?
always thought it was Ali, but I think it is Ale. That's me to
Ale.
Ale.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're fullbacks who can get up and down and have a good sort of passing range on them. They quite often give us trouble. The player who will play the ball to the player down the wing, if they're a good passer of the ball and they're good defensively, then that can always cause us problems. So yeah, I mean, even like you say with the goalkeeper, she's not in a great sort of form at the moment, but we have a phrase, down here. I'm sure other clubs do too, but we call it Dr. Brighton, which is basically if you haven't won a game for a while or you haven't been in good form or whatever, Dr. Brighton will cheer you right up and get you back on track. So it wouldn't surprise me if she has an absolute,
Yeah, no, I have seen
world class
the pattern.
performance.
I have
Yeah.
seen the
So
pattern for that.
yeah, so those are the ones that stick in my mind. But like I say, I think it will be a tight game, and it could just be one bit of magic from someone that turns the tide, really.
Yeah, commenter again, same commenter said, look out for Kiko Seiki. She has speed and good at 1v1. I think you're right. Brighton will win those battles 1v1, and Leicester will look to exploit them with their speed. Have you got a score prediction for us, Duncan? I always like to get a quick score prediction
Have
before
I
we
got
wrap
have
up.
I got to be diplomatic or
No,
because
that's why it's a good question, because you could say what you actually think.
because we always pick Brighton to win on our podcast, so I think it's just like an unwritten rule. But I'm
So
gonna
do I.
say 1-0 to Brighton, but it wouldn't surprise me if it was 1-0 to Leicester or a 1-goal swing. Or I genuinely don't see either team sort of winning every battle pillar to post and it being a sort of a I mean, it was a tale of two halves last season at the King Power, really, wasn't it? Because obviously, you guys go 3-0 up, and then the second half was just like siege after siege after siege. You sort of thought if we'd had 10 more minutes, we might have got a 3-3, but that's not how football works. So, yeah, I'm going to say a cautious 1-0 for Brighton, but like I say, I mean, it would not shock me if it was a draw or or Leicester nicked it somehow. So. Yeah.
No,
How about you?
I'm always positive on this podcast. I always go for Leicester.
Yeah.
The only time I didn't was when they played Manchester City. Or maybe I did. Maybe I said 2-1. Actually, I think I did say 2-1 Leicester against Man City. Always the positivity princess
You have
over
to be,
here.
don't you?
You do. Someone has to do it. Someone has to do it. I'm going to go 1-0 Leicester. I think it'll be very, very tight. And I think that it will be a margin of 1 goal either way. But I'll go 51% in the Leicester camp, I think, with that one. Okay, well, that concludes our episode. Thank you, everyone who watched. I think we hit about 16 viewers at one point, which is brilliant, maybe 17. So that is fantastic. Please keep watching the Women's Football Show. We love all your comments as well. You guys sharing your opinions. It's always great for us to have. As always, if you want to catch any more news, head on over to www.forfoxsake.news and you can subscribe for the price of a pint. And we'll bring you all the latest on the women's team, as well as everything else Leicester City related. So thank you very much to Duncan for coming on. It's been a pleasure having you. And yeah, all the best for the fixture. Obviously, not too much luck.
Of course.
But yes, and so been so great to hear what you've done at SheGulls, especially that International Women's Day moment. That's just, I love hearing that. That really brings me a lot of joy, and I'm sure the listeners and the viewers will have loved it as well. So thank you, Duncan.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure. Anytime.
Brilliant. Okay, right. Well, see you later, Foxes fans, and we'll probably see you next week for another episode.